Protesters taking to the streets in Tulsa, Oklahoma after a police officer shot and killed an unarmed black man on Friday. Crutcher was gunned down by Officer Betty Shelby. She was responding with other officers to two 911 calls about a car stopped in the middle of the road. We're going to show you part of the police video that they released. We warn you, it is disturbing. Here.
He's got his hands up there for her now. Mike, I'm going to hit the recorder. This guy's still walking and following commands.
Not for taser, I think.
Got a feeling that's about to happen.
That looks like a bad dude, too, to be honest with you.
Family is obviously outraged by what you see and, frankly, what you hear. Police characterizing their loved one as a bad dude in the midst of that altercation. Joining us now is the attorney for Officer Betty Shelby, Scott Wood. Counselor, thank you for joining us this morning. It's important to get perspective from both sides in a situation like this. What do you see in that video that justifies lethal force?
Well, Chris, one thing you have to understand is that before the video goes on, Officer Shelby had been dealing with this individual for probably a minute or a minute and a half. At the very outset, no one is around the car. She's driven up on the car. She doesn't know about the 911 calls that have come in. She's on her way to a domestic disturbance call. So she stops. It's an obvious traffic hazard, thinking, okay, someone needs some help. They need to get off the roadway or whatever. She goes up to the car. There's no one in it. And when she turns around, Mr. Crutcher comes walking up down East 36th Street North here in Tulsa.
Right. I understand that the context is relevant, that this wasn't the beginning of it. One, do you know if there's going to be any body camera or dashboard camera that comes out following this, other than the helicopter camera?
Some dash cam video has been released of the officers that arrived later. When Officer Shelby pulled up, she didn't see anybody around, wasn't planning on taking any enforcement action. She turned her light switch on to the back blinkers of her police car, which do not activate the camera system.
So she didn't turn on the camera. Did she have body camera?
No body cameras. Tulsa has gotten grant money for Tulsa Police Department for body cameras, but that program has not been implemented as yet.
All right, and I'm not saying that in an incriminating way. I'm just saying that very often this video helps explain an officer's actions, not just being damning, but also can often be validating. So back to the original question. Given the benefit of context, what in this video suggests to you a need to use lethal force as opposed to all the other layers of force that they could use? They could have run up and grabbed this man and thrown him on the ground. None of that done. Why?
Well, Officer Shelby, at one point that's not on video, decided her gun needed to come out of her holster. Mr. Crutcher had repeatedly gone to his left pocket and started to put his hand in it. She commanded him not to do that at least 3 or 4 different times, leading up to the point where she finally pulled her gun and got on the radio and said, "Dispatcher, hold traffic.
So
I have
he
a
had,
subject here who's not following my
had 3 or
commands."
4 opportunities to reach in his pocket and withdraw a weapon and did not, and wound up with his hands above his head. So help us understand from that point, given again the benefit of context. She said, "Don't go near your pocket." He then puts his hands over his head, meaning he cannot get to his pocket. What was the decision of the officer that I need to shoot him?
The furtive movement that he made once he got up to the driver's window. But you have to understand, she had given him commands to get down on the ground. Once her gun came out of her holster, she ordered him to the ground. He refused to comply, refused to communicate with her really in any way. And she's a drug recognition expert, Officer Shelby, and she formed the opinion that, hey, this guy is really, really high on something, probably PCP, and those people are highly unpredictable. She knew she couldn't physically do anything with him until some help got there. So
right, but when you're dealing with the mentally ill,
on a regular basis,
but when you're trained, correct me if I'm wrong, when you're getting your training, If you believe that someone has diminished capacity, if you believe they're on drugs, if you believe they're mentally unstable, there are protocols of training that do not lead you to, oh, this person's on drugs, you should shoot them. The furtive move, the window's closed, the door is closed, so he doesn't enter the vehicle. I'm just trying to understand why the officer tells you she never thought to get with some of the other officers who were there, multiple officers, and take him down without lethal force. Why did they not try that?
Well, because Officer Shelby did believe that he probably had a gun on his person because of the behavior, the continued reaching for that left pocket area. She was very, very concerned about that. And the fact that somebody who's being held at gunpoint simply turns their back and walks to their car, I think that you can imply some type of motive or intent for someone who's returning to their car to do what? Get in it and leave. He was standing at the door there for quite a few seconds, never tried to open the door and get in or leave, but it was that furtive movement at the door that made both Officer Shelby fire her weapon and Officer Turnbow, who was with her, discharge his taser.
Does the officer?
Officer Turnbow.
Go ahead. Finish your point.
Yeah, Officer Turnbow has said that if he would have had a gun in his hand at that time, he would have used it too. But in a situation like this, he was coming up as less lethal coverage, and he responded to the same thing that Officer Shelby saw as Mr. Crutcher stood at the doorway of that car.
Less lethal coverage. We're going to have to figure out what that means. Let me ask you this quickly. Does the officer regret what she did? Does she wish she could have done something else?
Oh, of course. You know, in hindsight, looking back and now knowing that he didn't have a weapon on his person and there wasn't a weapon in the car, of course, she's horribly, horribly upset over this ordeal and has been praying for the Crutcher family. She feels very badly about what happened.
Counselor, thank you very much. Not an easy conversation to have. As we get more facts, please come on the show so we can have a continued discussion. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Chris.
Allison.
Chris, Hillary Clinton calls that police shooting in Tulsa intolerable, but what would she do about it as president? And